Let's imagine it's just another walk. You step out onto a quiet suburban street, or maybe a campus path between cold concrete lecture halls. It's calm, almost empty. And then you feel it. That tiny prickling on the back of your neck, like you just walked onto a stage you didn't know was there. You look up. On top of a streetlight, a single crow is staring straight down at you. Not vaguely in your direction, not bird random, directly at your face. Its feathers look like poured oil, its beak hooked and still, and the air carries this sharp, metallic rattle of a call that sounds way too much like a warning siren compressed into bird form. You might think it's just curious. Bird brain, right? But what you actually find, when you really look back, is something a lot more focused. The crow tilts its head, one glossy eye catching the light so it flashes for a second, like a tiny black mirror. It shifts, just enough, as if lining you up. Front view, side view, profile, like it's comparing your face to a file it already has on you. You keep walking, pretending you're not weirdly in a staring contest with a bird. But the calls keep coming, that harsh caw ricocheting off parked cars and windows. And then, as you pass under the pole, the crow leans forward, wings half open, not flying, just reacting, instantly, like it's been waiting for you. Well, this isn't your first meeting, is it? Maybe a couple of years ago, you waved your arms and shooed a crow off a ripped trash bag, annoyed at the mess. Maybe you tossed it a few peanuts once, laughing when it hopped closer, or you walked past while someone else was chasing it away. It was a nothing moment for you, background noise in a busy day. But for the crow, that was you. Your voice, your posture, your face, burned in like a photograph. Now, watch what happens. Another crow lands on the wire ahead of you, then two more on a rooftop, one on a chimney. They're not just randomly hanging out, they're angled toward you, bodies tense, eyes bright. Calls start bouncing back and forth, a rough, crackling chorus, like they're passing along a message about you, personally. See, it feels almost paranoid to think your identity is being broadcast up and down the block by a bunch of birds. But this is the world of crow memory. When one crow tags you as important, the others learn. Parents teach it to their young. Strangers pick it up from the noise. And yes, these guys are all real. Crows never forget a human face, and they share that knowledge. So how does a bird with a walnut-sized brain remember you better than you remember it, and turn your neighborhood into a living, flying database? That's what we're about to unpack. So let's imagine you're just walking down your street. Sidewalk, parked cars, the usual background noise of your life. You might think the only people paying attention to you are the neighbors behind their curtains, but what you actually find, if you look up, is a quiet little surveillance network sitting on the power lines. Every black shape up there is running its own version of facial recognition. Not sci-fi lasers, not some metaphor. Actual biological face tracking. Crows can distinguish dozens of individual human faces, not just people as one blurry category, but you versus your roommate, you versus that one guy who always forgets trash day. To them, your face is as specific as a logo. See, in a crow's world, every human is a walking risk assessment. Are you the person who leaves peanuts on the balcony? Are you the one who once tossed a rock at them in the parking lot? Are you just background scenery? Their eyes lock onto your features, and behind those eyes, a tiny, dense brain is quietly tagging you. Think of it as a mental list, a floating database each bird carries around. Your face goes in with a label: friend, threat, or unknown. Feed them the same way, in the same spot, over and over. You slowly slide into friend, with a warm, emotional tag attached. Wave your arms, chase them, or grab one for a research project. Congratulations, you've just been promoted to dangerous, with flashing red warnings. And this list doesn't reset when you do. Long after you forget that one afternoon you shoot a crow off your sandwich, it may still remember the exact angle of your jaw, the way your hair falls, the shape of your glasses. Years later, you step into the same parking lot, and instantly, before you even notice the birds, a crow that knew you as a problem will stiffen, call out, and start scolding. The wild part is how long this can run. In the famous Seattle experiment, researchers wore creepy rubber masks while capturing crows. That was it. One bad day. But for years afterward, campus crows would explode into angry calls whenever anyone wore that same mask, even if it was a totally different person underneath. They didn't care about the coat, the walk, the voice. The mask's face was on the list. And because crows are social, that list doesn't stay private. One bird spots a known threat, screams about it, and nearby crows rush in, learn the face, and add it to their own mental files. Parents teach their young who to avoid. Strangers just flying over pick up the gossip. So if a crow can tag you, remember you, and broadcast you, how far does that secret list actually spread? Is it just one neighborhood, one flock, or an entire city quietly comparing notes about you from above? So to find out how far that crow gossip network really goes, let's imagine you're not you for a second. You're a researcher on a leafy university campus in Seattle, walking past brick buildings and students with coffee cups, carrying a cartoonishly creepy rubber mask. You might think this is just Halloween coming early, but what you actually find is a full-on bird drama about to start. The campus looks normal. Bike racks, shady trees, crows poking at fries in the grass. Then, in the middle of all that, a scientist slips on this pale, dead-eyed mask that screams, "Do not trust me," from across the quad. In that mask, they do one bad thing. Just once. They capture a few wild crows in nets, band their legs for ID, then let them go. No blood, no torture chamber, just a very stressful few minutes that, if you're a crow, feels like you almost died. Other researchers wander around in neutral, boring masks, doing absolutely nothing threatening. Same campus, same time, totally different vibe. See, the question was simple. Would the crows hate humans in general after this, or would they lock onto that one dangerous face? The answer showed up fast. As soon as the captured birds were free, they saw the creepy mask again and lost it. They screamed, they scolded, they dive-bombed. They pulled in their friends from the trees, turning one masked person into a walking alarm siren. But the same birds mostly ignored the neutral masks. Same bodies, same clothes, same walk across the quad. The only real difference was the face. To the crows, that rubber mask wasn't a prop. It was a specific person who had almost killed them. And this is where it stops being a cute campus story and starts feeling bigger. Because the researchers didn't just do this for a week and go home. They kept that mask. Years later, they walked the same paths again. Same creepy face. Totally different day. Some of the original captured crows were gone. New generations had grown up. The campus had changed. The mask hadn't. Well, the reaction hadn't either. Crows that had never been caught still erupted the moment they saw that face. Birds on rooftops and power lines dove at it. Others joined in just because they heard the specific alarm calls. The mask had become a kind of cursed wanted poster, passed along in crow culture like, if you see this guy, scream first. Ask questions never. So now you're stuck with a bigger question. If one fake face can become a legendary villain in a Crow City, what happens when the face is actually you? Lie. So now you're stuck with a bigger question. If one fake face can become a legendary villain in a Crow City, what happens when the face is actually you? And more than that, how does that legend keep going long after the original crime scene is over and done? Let's imagine you walk back onto that Seattle campus 10 years later. New buildings, new students, totally different vibe. The original captured crows? Some of them are gone, but the researchers pull out the same rubber danger mask, and instantly the sky just erupts. Young crows that were never grabbed, never netted, never even saw the original experiment, are dropping out of the air screaming like they've been personally wronged. You might think, okay, they must all secretly remember being captured, like some shared bird PTSD. But what you actually find is we're watching a completely different trick. These are wild animals, with no language you understand, no written records, no wanted posters on crow billboards. And yet, somehow, the identity of one specific dangerous person has been passed down, crow to crow, year after year. See, this is the part where your brain wants to say, that's a human thing. Memory that lasts for years. Teaching the kids who to trust and who to hate. That feels like primate territory. But you're standing under a flock of city crows doing all of that over your head on a weekday, between class changes. So how do you actually teach a bird to hate a face? Is it just raw emotion, like they get so scared once that the image burns in forever? Or is there something way more organized going on, where one crow's bad day becomes a kind of cold, efficient warning system pulsing through the whole neighborhood? Well, this video is going to pull that apart piece by piece. We're going inside a crow's head to see how a brain the size of a giant walnut still locks onto individual human faces, even when you change your haircut, your jacket, your entire vibe. We're going to watch how crow social networks move information, how one loud alarm can recruit total strangers, and how those strangers then remember you on sight. And it's not all fury. Some crows actually forgive. Some do the opposite and start leaving you weird little gifts because you fed them during a cold winter. This is the world of long grudges and long gratitude, both written into tiny, densely packed bird neurons. By the time we're done, you might have to rethink what a small brain can do, and what kind of relationship you're accidentally building every time you walk past that flock on the power line. Because the real twist isn't just that crows never forget a face. It's what they decide to do with that memory next. So, let's imagine you're not on the sidewalk this time. You're above it. You're the crow on the power line, looking down at this endless human parade. From up here, everyone's just heads. Moving dots with backpacks. You might think they'd all blur into one big, boring, human category. But what you actually find, from a crow's eye, is a lot of sharp, juicy detail. That slightly crooked nose on the guy with the red jacket? The high, straight hairline on the woman with the fast walk? The way one kid tilts their head when they laugh? Those aren't background noise. Those are anchors. Crows watch a stream of faces the way you scroll a feed, quickly, but with scary precision. For what stands out, what repeats, and what feels dangerous. See, birds in general are visual overachievers. Their eyes are packed with photoreceptors, and many species, including crows, see finer detail than you do. They're built to pick out a tiny insect on dark bark, or a hawk speck in a cold sky. On top of that, they process motion really fast. What looks like a casual arm wave to you is a whole sequence of micro-movements to them, almost like slow-motion fight choreography. Now plug that into human faces, A crow isn't just seeing a person in a coat. Its visual system is quietly encoding the exact contour of your jawline, the spacing of your eyes, the way your eyebrows sit when you're calm versus when you're annoyed. Your hairline becomes a border. Your glasses become landmarks. The rhythm of how you walk is basically your personal theme song. And yes, these guys are all real visual nerds. When researchers scanned corvid brains, they found specialized regions in the forebrain that light up for complex shapes, including faces and masks. Functionally, it's weirdly similar to what primate brains do with face recognition. Different hardware, same trick. Evolution basically ran two separate experiments and still decided, yeah, having a dedicated "Who is this" module is a huge win. That's why, on that Seattle campus, crows could lock onto a single rubber danger mask and treat it like a villain for years. They weren't just mad at a lab coat. They were mad at a specific configuration of cheekbones, nose, and eye holes that got burned into their visual circuits the day it grabbed them. But seeing your face is only half the story. The real plot twist is how long they keep that mental snapshot and what they do with it socially. Who do they tell? How do they decide if you go on the gift list or the scream at this clown forever list? This is the world of crow memory, and that's where things get a lot bigger than just eyesight. So, you've got this mental image of a crow glaring at you from a branch, screaming its head off, and you might think, "Relax, little dude. Your brain is the size of a walnut. How much can you really remember?" Let's imagine you could hold your brain in one hand and a crow's skull in the other. One is a 3-pound, wrinkled cauliflower. The other is, basically, a sleek, black ping-pong ball with a beak. By every lazy cartoon rule, the bigger brain should win, right? Bigger must mean smarter, colder must mean slower, and bird brain is supposed to be an insult. But what you actually find, once you zoom in, is that size is a terrible way to judge intelligence. It's not about volume. It's about how much thinking hardware you can cram into that volume without it overheating or turning into jelly. See, your brain has this big folded outer layer called the cortex, full of ridges and valleys. Bird brains skipped that look. They went for something that, at first glance, just looks smooth and simple. But inside that smooth surface, crows did the one thing evolution loves even more than making things giant. They packed it. Their forebrain, especially a region called the pallium, is stuffed with neurons like a server room someone built inside a closet. When scientists counted, corvids did something kind of rude to our expectations. A crow's forebrain can rival that of a small monkey in neuron number, even though the whole head is tiny. That dense network sits exactly where you handle planning, problem solving, flexible behavior, and, yes, keeping track of who did what to you. In other words, the same kind of circuitry primates use to remember faces, hold grudges, and scheme, just running on a much smaller, colder power supply. So when a crow tags your face as net guy or peanut lady, it's not a flimsy short-term note. Those tightly packed neurons lay down rich associations, your eyes, your walk, your voice, glued to a specific emotional file. Pain, fear, food, safety. That file doesn't just float around for a week and vanish. Studies suggest these memories can sit in that walnut-sized supercomputer for years, ready to boot up the moment you appear. Here's the pattern interrupt. The next time a crow locks eyes with you, you're not looking at some tiny, instinct-driven autopilot. You're facing a compact, high-efficiency computer that already has your profile open on the screen. The only real question is which folder you're in right now, and how that file is about to get updated by the rest of the flock. So, let's imagine what happens the day that file gets opened in public. It's a gray Seattle morning on the University of Washington campus. Students spill out of brick buildings, coffee in one hand, phone in the other. Doors swing open, and out steps a person in that same rubber danger mask the researchers used to grab crows weeks before. To you, it just looks like a weird Halloween prop. To one crow on a nearby light pole, it's a jump scare with feathers. That crow freezes, head tilted, eyes locked. You might think it would just quietly avoid the threat and move on, but what you actually find is way louder. The bird explodes into an alarm call, this harsh, repeating scream that basically translates to, "Hey, that face is bad news. Get over here right now." Within seconds, other crows who never saw the original capture come rocketing in. They weren't grabbed. They weren't tagged. They just heard the panic. See, crows treat each other's fear like breaking news. One dives past the masked person's head. Another perches above, staring down, comparing the strange pale face with the frantic body language of the first crow. From the crow's point of view, this is simple math. Dangerous face plus trusted neighbor losing their mind equals add this face to my own danger list. They don't need to personally feel the net close over their wings. They just watch the social drama, then quietly burn that image into memory. This is social learning in real time. One bad experience, many new believers. Over the next few days, the experimenters keep walking that same campus route, same mask, same gate. But now, every pass is like a mobile fire alarm test. A crow that remembers screams. New birds rush in, see the mask, see the mobbing, and update their own internal files. It snowballs. What started as a handful of captured birds turns into dozens, then hundreds, until the whole place feels like it's running a shared most wanted list in the sky. And yes, these guys are all real. Actual wild crows that will drop whatever they're doing just to yell at a rubber face. Years later, even young birds who weren't alive during the first capture will still react, because they grew up watching their parents scold that same mask like it stole rent money. By this point, the mask isn't just suspicious, it's infamous. A walking, talking wanted poster. One human face, tagged as hostile by an entire campus of birds that never sat in a single lecture. But if they can do that with an enemy, what happens when the face they memorize isn't dangerous at all, but quietly useful? What if the next file they share isn't "do not approach," but "protect at all costs"? So let's imagine the mask comes off. Same campus, same skyline, same black silhouettes on the lampposts. But this time, the human walking across the grass isn't carrying nets or traps. They're carrying a paper bag of unsalted peanuts. Every morning. Same path, same time, same quiet little ritual with the birds that everyone else power walks past. You might think the crows barely notice. Just another background human doing background human things. But what you actually find, if you watch for more than a day, is that the schedule starts to flip. The crows are already there. They're on the power lines, in the bare branches, on the roof edges, 10 minutes early like tiny feathery commuters waiting for their bus. They know the route. They know the rhythm of the footsteps. And they really know the face. Dark eyes track that one specific human from half a block away, heads tilting in perfect sync, like they've pulled up the right file in their internal database. Peanut person, approved. One soft call goes out, then another, not the harsh alarm from the mask experiment, but low, rippling notes that sound almost like they're talking to each other about you. See, the mental tag attached to this face is completely different. No sirens, no mobbing, no dive bombing the hat. Instead, it triggers approach mode. Birds drop from the trees in slow spirals, land just far enough away to look polite about it, and start that half-hop, half-bow behavior you only see when a crow is both cautious and very, very interested in what's in your hand. The body language shifts too. Feathers stay sleek instead of puffed. Wings are tucked, not flared. The calls are soft, almost conversational, like they're narrating your every move to the rest of the group. This is the world of positive facial tagging, where your image doesn't mean danger incoming. It means snacks plus safe vibes. And once that tag is in place, the relationship can get weirdly reciprocal. There are reports of crows screaming at hawks the second they drift anywhere near a favorite human, shadowing them across a park while side-eyeing a stalking cat, or even kicking off a loud commentary when a stranger steps a little too close. Is that crow just being noisy? Or is it trying to warn you about the sketchy guy who suddenly changed direction behind you? Well, and yes, these guys are all real. Wild crows have dropped shiny screws, bits of colored glass, and random metal trinkets near doorsteps and balconies where their person reliably appears with food, like tiny thank you notes from the air. So if they can blacklist one face and whitelist another, how many secret reputations are you already carrying with the birds above your own street? And what happens when we zoom out from one peanut stop to an entire city full of flying witnesses keeping score? So, let's imagine this reputation system in the sky stops being abstract and starts knocking, literally, on one family's window. You're in a small house on a quiet street. Every morning, the same routine. Someone steps out with a mug of coffee and a handful of peanuts. The neighborhood crows are already waiting on the power lines, doing that casual, "we just happen to be here" act that fools exactly no one. At first, it's simple. You toss food, they swoop down, everyone goes home happy. But what you actually find, a few weeks in, is that the transaction doesn't end there. One morning, the family notices a tiny, shiny screw sitting dead center on the windowsill. No wind pattern does that. No squirrel organizes hardware. The next week, after a bigger feeding, extra peanuts, maybe some leftover dog kibble, another object appears. A bent piece of metal, like it's been carefully dropped. Then a bead of bright blue plastic shows up in the bird bath, right where the water ripples when the crows land. You might think it's coincidence. Random junk plus gravity. But the timing starts to line up a little too well. One day, a juvenile crow tangles itself in garden netting. The family actually goes out, holds the panicking bird, and cuts it free. The next morning, two objects, a scrap of foil glittering in the cold light, and a tiny rusted washer, both placed neatly by the door they use to come outside. See, this is the world of crow gifts. Not every crow does this, and not every human gets promoted to gift status. But enough people have documented this exact pattern, food and calm behavior in, shiny objects out, that it stops feeling like random trash and starts looking a lot like reciprocity. Scientists are careful here. Is the crow really thanking you, or just associating your face with good things happen and responding with its own version of good stuff? Either way, the important part is that it's not just rewarding humans in general. It's locked onto a specific household, a specific doorway, a specific face that shows up behind the glass. Because that same family can move to the backyard, change jackets, put on a hat, and the crows still track them. The birds are building a file on that person, tagging not just the visual pattern of the face, but the emotional history attached to it. This one feeds us. This one helped. This one is safe. And yes, these guys are all real. Real birds, running a real feedback loop. You hand over peanuts. They hand over metal and plastic trophies. But here's the pattern interrupt. In that moment, who's actually training whom? When you keep showing up on schedule, responding to their calls, giving more after they reward you, are you the clever human with a pet crow, or are you the well-conditioned primate on the receiving end of a very patient bird experiment? So, if you're the one dutifully showing up with peanuts on schedule, what does that make you in a crow's mental filing cabinet? Snack machine? Trained primate? Emotional landmark? Because for crows, you're not just human number 47. You're a very specific story with wings attached to it. Let's imagine two parallel universes on your street. In one, a bored teenager once lobbed rocks at a crow nest, knocked a chick to the ground, and walked away. In the other, someone else gently scooped a soaked fledgling out of a cold gutter and set it on a branch to dry. You might think both of those moments just vanish into the noise of wild animal life. But what you actually find is that crows bookmark those scenes like giant emotional highlighters. Fast forward. The rock thrower walks past that same tree years later. Before they even look up, the air is already loud. A crow spots the face, screams that harsh scolding call, and suddenly it's a mob scene. Birds that weren't even born during the original crime are diving, buzzing the person's head, following them down the block. Same sidewalk, different human. The rescuer. This time the crows go quiet. Maybe just watch from a few feet away. Maybe even shadow them along the route like a feathery escort. No gifts, no Disney musical number, but a very clear, "You can be here." See, this is the world of crow emotions mapped onto crow memory. They don't just remember what you did, they act like they remember how you made them feel. Wariness shows up as extra distance, constant side-eye, ready-to-bolt posture. Curiosity looks like head tilts, closer perching, that slow walk toward your outstretched hand. And with some humans, you actually get what looks suspiciously like affection. Soft calls, relaxed feathers, a bird quietly hanging out above your door for no obvious food reason. Under the hood, a single intense event is doing a lot of work. Capture, attack, rescue, regular feeding. Any of those can weld your face to a strong emotional tag. The University of Washington mask experiment showed this brutally well. People wearing one dangerous mask trapped and banded crows once. Years later, crows still erupted whenever that same mask appeared, even on a totally different body, scolding and recruiting their neighbors into the outrage. And yes, these guys are all real emotional archivists. They pulled that dangerous face out of storage instantly, like, "Oh, it's you." No rehearsal, no warm-up. Just pure, long-term recognition. Those tags are surprisingly stable. Some birds reacted 5, 6, 7 breeding seasons after the original event, long after a human would have mostly forgotten a random day on campus. Well, if their private grudge list and gratitude list are this rich, you might think it stops there. Just you and the birds that personally met you. But what happens when they start teaching those feelings to their kids? And your reputation keeps walking around the neighborhood even when you're not there. So, that's where it gets a little creepy. Your relationship with the crows doesn't just live in the heads of the birds that met you. It gets enrolled in what is basically crow school. Let's imagine a chilly morning on a campus lawn or over your street. High up on a wire, a scruffy young crow is wobbling next to a parent, still doing that awkward baby bird shuffle. You might think this is just a quiet family moment. But what you actually find is a lesson in progress. The adult is scanning every face below. Calm, 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 and then suddenly explodes into harsh alarm calls. To you, it's just noise. To that fledgling, It's a fire drill with one very specific target. The parent leans forward, wings flared, staring straight at a single human face they already hate. Maybe the researcher's rubber mask. Maybe the neighbor who once threw rocks. The youngster tracks that exact face, those eyes, that jawline, while the air fills with panic. See, fledglings learn by association, not lectures. They feel the spike of fear in the flock, hear the angry scolding, and lock that visual pattern into memory. That face equals danger. That silhouette is something you avoid. Or if you're a crow, something you gather your friends to yell at. No one has to explain it. Their nervous system just quietly writes, "Do not trust this one." In the Seattle study, you actually watch this process scale up. Years after the original captures, new generations that had never been touched by a scientist still joined the attack on the dangerous mask. A grad student could walk across campus in that same rubber face and suddenly be surrounded by birds that weren't even alive when the experiment started, all screaming like they had a personal vendetta. And yes, these guys are all real. Researchers mapped it. Crows that only heard the commotion or saw others mobbing still learned the rule. One bad day with a net turned into a multi-year, multi-generational reputation. That's the efficiency of crow memory. Instead of every bird needing its own traumatic origin story, the group just uploads the file and shares it. This is the world of collective warning, where one human's choice can echo as a cold, sharp silhouette in dozens of tiny black brains. It's faster, safer, and way cheaper than each crow running its own experiment called, "What if I land right next to the scary ape?" But if they can pass down your face as a threat, could they also pass down your face as something else? A walking food truck, a safe neighbor, even an ally. What would it actually take to flip your file from "mob on site" to "bring the kids, this one's fine"? So, let's imagine you zoom the camera way out, not on one crow, not on one grudge, but on an entire city block. Same streetlights, same power lines, same crooked maple tree. The humans change, the crows don't. Up in those branches, generations are cycling through like a time lapse. Great-grandparents nested in that traffic island tree when the cars were older and the billboards were different. Their chicks watched a kid in a red backpack walk to school, then watched that same kid years later pushing a stroller under the exact same wires. You might think the city is aging around them, but what you actually find is that for crows, this whole place is a living family album. Because to them, a city isn't just buildings and bus stops. It's a layered story. That corner? That's where a man in a gray coat used to throw peanuts every afternoon, right before the streetlights clicked on. That balcony? That's where a hawk took one of their friends, and the memory still makes the flock go quiet when they pass. That alley behind the supermarket? Food appears on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. like some kind of huge, predictable magic trick. This is the world of crow culture, not in the cute, they like shiny things way, but in the serious, shared software way. Habits, shortcuts, and local traditions get built on top of those long memories. One city's crows learn to crack walnuts in crosswalks, timing the traffic lights better than half the drivers. Another city's crows raid outdoor cafes, specializing in fries and unattended muffins. Same species, completely different playbooks, all taught socially. And inside that culture, specific humans become recurring characters. The woman who always brings kibble in a blue bowl. The guy who once threw a rock at a nest. The jogger who never breaks eye contact, but never does anything bad either. Faces like that don't just live in one brain. They get talked about, yelled about, pointed out with beaks and calls until mask guy equals danger or red scarf lady equals snacks becomes part of the local crow lore. Pattern interrupt. What if you're not the main character here at all? See, from a crow's perspective, the city is basically an archive, and you're the one flickering in and out of the footage. They're the permanent residents. You're the short-term background extra. Unless you do something unforgettable, your face is just static between more important frames. Predators, food sources, safe roofs, dangerous windows. But when you are unforgettable, very kind, very cruel, or just very predictable, you get promoted. You become a landmark. Not a building, but a moving, breathing waypoint in crow memory. Turn left at the bus stop, watch for the dog, and if the peanut lady's out, bring the kids. And once a city has run on that kind of crow story for long enough, you have to ask, what happens when the archive starts editing back, nudging where crows nest, where they dare to land, and which humans they quietly decide to live beside? So, let's imagine you could open up a crow's mind like a filing cabinet. Not a neat human office one, but a slightly chaotic, sky-level archive that actually works. Each drawer is a place. Your street, that campus quad from the mask experiment, the grocery parking lot where fries go to die, the cold metal rooftop above your bus stop. Open the campus quad folder, and you don't just get a map. You get faces. Little mental snapshots of humans, tagged with emotions. This one, dangerous, mask, grabbed my wing. That one, generous, brings peanuts, talks in a soft voice. Another, giant walking coat rack, totally irrelevant. You might think a bird brain would just store human task threat and call it a day, but what you actually find is a surprisingly specific cast list. Researchers studying corvids talk about something very close to episodic memory, the kind you use to remember that one time you slipped on the ice in front of your old school. Crows can track what happened, where it happened, who was involved, and even roughly when. This is the world of bird intelligence, where a crow isn't just remembering a face, it's remembering a scene. So, picture that Seattle mask study living inside the cabinet. In the quad folder, there's a photo of that creepy rubber face stapled to a red-hot emotion tag. Fear, anger, alert. Every time someone walks by in that same mask, even years later, the crow pulls the file, slaps it on the mental desk, and hits the alarm button. It calls, recruits other crows, and suddenly their cabinets all get a copy of that same dangerous face. And yes, these guys are all real. Brain scans show their forebrains are jammed with neurons, giving them primate-level processing in a skull the size of a walnut. It's like evolution tried to run desktop gaming specs on a phone and somehow pulled it off. That's why the cabinet can handle not just who, but who, where, and under what circumstances did you try to net me, Steve? Every repeat encounter updates the file. You walk under their tree again? The crow checks, still yelling at chicks, still throwing rocks, still dangerous. Or maybe you've been quietly leaving food, backing away slowly, never staring. New line in the file. Still generous, still predictable. Maybe bring friends. The memory trace gets thicker, bigger, harder to erase because the brain keeps resaving over the same document. But this system is efficient. Crows don't waste cabinet space on every random passerby. Background humans blur together, while outliers, captors, feeders, kids who throw sticks get their own glossy photo and a permanent label. And if they're running this whole mental database on us, you have to wonder, are we the main folder? Or just one weird colored tab in a much bigger ledger of faces, species, and secrets they're quietly keeping in the sky? In that bigger ledger, You're not alone. You're just one entry. Because crows aren't only memorizing human faces, they're running the same surveillance system on each other. Let's imagine you're a crow for a second. You don't just see some other crow on the next branch. You see the neighbor who stole your nesting twig last spring. You see the mate who fed you when you were exhausted. You see the rival who tried to raid your chicks 2 years ago and is absolutely still on your personal blacklist. They remember allies, rivals, mates, and neighbors across multiple breeding seasons, and they act like it. You might think that level of drama is just humans projecting, but what you actually find is a very real social memory. The same individual birds will team up to mob a shared enemy, show up to help longtime partners, and go out of their way to harass specific troublemakers. That's not generic crow versus crow aggression. That's, "Oh, it's you again." And they don't stop with their own species. Out in a neighborhood, they're quietly cataloging every other animal that matters. That orange cat that stalks under hedges and jumps for low branches. High-risk predator, flagged in red. The lazy gray cat that mostly sleeps on warm car hoods. Low threat, maybe worth a casual glance. The hawk that dives hard at anything that moves gets instant air raid sirens. The bigger hawk that mostly cruises through on its way somewhere else? Noted. Tracked, but not worth burning all your energy on every single time. Dogs get sorted too. One dog charges the tree and barks like it's auditioning for a horror movie. That silhouette goes straight into the danger folder. Another dog walks past, totally blind to the crows, or is literally blind and stumbles by. Different label, different response. The crows still watch, but they don't waste a full screaming mob on an animal that's never actually chased them. See, humans are just one category in that mental filing cabinet. Our faces sit right alongside cat outlines, hawk wing shapes, and the calls of particular crow families. This is the world of crow social intelligence, a constantly updated map of who hurts you, who helps you, who ignores you, and who might change sides if things get weird. And this isn't just gossip, it's survival. Being able to tell the difference between a hawk that always attacks and one that mostly ignores them is the line between raising your chicks and losing them. Knowing which dog is chained, which dog is old, which dog is fast, and which human throws rocks versus which human throws peanuts. That's life or death math. Well, here's the unsettling part. The same cognitive machinery that tracks crow loyalties and betrayals is quietly pointed at you every time you walk outside. You're being slotted into ally, enemy, or background noise in a brain that never really stops updating your file. So, if crows are running this giant cross-species database in their heads, how do they actually share that information with each other, and even pass it down to birds that have never seen you before? So, that whole crow neighborhood watch system, it's not a weird one-off. Once you zoom out, you realize crows are just one chapter in a much bigger, much stranger saga, the Bird Genius Club. Let's imagine you swap the crows for their goth cousin, the raven. Same family, bigger body, even more drama. In food-sharing experiments, ravens learn which humans are fair partners and which ones are sneaky thieves. A person offers to trade, lures the raven in, then cheats and keeps the good stuff. You might think the bird just flaps off and forgets, but what you actually find is that the raven files that human under "do not trust" and acts on it. Later, when that same experimenter comes back, ravens that were cheated avoid them, refuse to cooperate, and sometimes even give them the silent treatment while happily working with a different person right next to them. They are literally running a mental Yelp review for humans, with long-term one-star ratings that can last for years. And then you've got parrots, the loud roommates of the bird world, especially African greys. This is the world of birds that can learn hundreds of words, recognize people, and use those labels in ways that actually make sense. One famous African grey, Alex, didn't just mimic sounds. He could identify colors, shapes, numbers, and specific humans, and he kept those associations stable over years. You might think that's just a fancy recording device with feathers. But when a bird calls you by name after months apart, asks for a specific toy, or uses want go to demand leaving a boring situation, you're looking at long-term social memory tied to real meaning. The brain is hanging on to who you are, what you do, and how you usually act. Corvids don't just remember faces, some of them remember entire maps. Jays and other corvids stash thousands of food items in the ground, in bark, under leaves, then find them again months later, even after weather, snow, and plant growth have completely rearranged the scenery. They're not just following smell, they remember where, what, and when. Which cache was peanuts, which was bugs, which one is about to rot. That's a powerful spatial and episodic-like memory system running on a brain the size of a walnut. And yes, these guys are all real. Evolution looked at the cold, risky social lives of birds and basically said, okay, fine, give them primate-level problem-solving, just smaller. Pattern interrupt for your brain. If ravens track cheaters, parrots remember you and your words, and jays run underground food spreadsheets. Should bird brain actually be an insult? Or is that just us outing ourselves as the slower species in this particular club? Because when you line up primates and these birds, you see a weird mirror. Totally different brain shapes, totally different wiring, but similar solutions. Long-term social memory, planning, flexible learning. Convergent evolution, quietly turning feathers and fur into rival versions of intelligence. And if birds can build these mental files on each other and on us, the next question is brutal. What are they doing with that information when we're not around? So, to answer that brutal question, you have to zoom out and look at how a crow actually lives. Let's imagine you're not a person walking under power lines, but a crow born into a noisy, feathered neighborhood. You don't just flap around randomly. You grow up in a tight family, with parents, older siblings, sometimes even aunties all helping raise the chicks. You might think birds just pair up, lay eggs and leave, but what you actually find in corvids is this long, slow, drama-filled life. They can live 20 years or more. They stay near their parents' territory. Older kids help feed younger kids. Everyone remembers who shared food, who chased them off a branch, who stole a carefully hidden cache in the cold of winter. It's basically a soap opera with wings. In that kind of world, memory isn't a bonus. It's survival. If you forget which neighbor tried to raid your nest last year, you lose your chicks. If you don't remember which cousin helped mob an owl, you miss a future ally. So evolution quietly cranks up the mental filing system. Faces, voices, patterns of behavior, all tagged as friend, rival, or full-on threat. See, this is the world of long-term grudges and long-term alliances. A crow that can track who did what to it 5 breeding seasons ago has a huge edge over one that just resets every spring. And over thousands of generations, those tiny advantages stack up until you've basically built a feathered politician that never forgets a slight. If that sounds weirdly familiar, it should. Monkeys and apes are playing the same game. They live in complex groups where who sits next to whom, who grooms whom, who joined which fight last week, all decide who eats first and who gets shoved off the best branch. Primates that track these shifting alliances get bigger payoffs, so their brains balloon around social strategy. Crows did not copy primates. Their brains are shaped totally differently. But under the same pressure, long lives, tight families, vicious competition over food and space, evolution went off the rails in the same direction. High-powered social memory, flexible planning, individual recognition. And then humans show up. From a crow's perspective, you're just another giant, unpredictable primate stomping through the territory. You feed them, or you chase them. You cut down trees, or you put out trash buffets. Why wouldn't they track your face with the same intensity they use on their most dangerous neighbors? Well, once you realize you've wandered into a world built on alliances, betrayals, and very long memories, the real question gets uncomfortable. What exactly happens when you accidentally take a side in that crow drama and don't even know you're playing? So, let's imagine it starts on a day you barely remember. You're late? You cut through a little city park you almost never use. The air's that kind of damp and cold that makes you walk faster. Up ahead, a crow is tearing at a sandwich crust on the path. You might think, whatever, just a bird, and keep moving. But what you actually find from the crow's side is politics. You drift closer, maybe you nudge your foot toward it, or wave your arms to shoo it off because you don't feel like stepping around bird drama today. Maybe you do the opposite and toss the last bite of your own snack toward it without even looking up. Either way, you just voted in crow society. See, in that split second, you've done one of three things. You provided resources, you threatened them, or you signaled that you're unpredictable and kind of chaotic. And because this is the world of long memories in small skulls, that crow's brain quietly tags your face: feeder, bully, or unstable wildcard. You don't notice the juvenile on the lamppost above you, cocking its head to get a better angle on your eyes. You don't see the mate on the roofline, frozen mid-peck, watching your mouth, your hair, the way you move. You definitely don't register the two neighbors in the maple tree, half hidden in the leaves, both staring straight at your face as you walk away. From your perspective, that interaction is over. From theirs, the data upload has just started. The crow you shoot off calls loudly, that harsh, scolding sound. The others lean in, literally, tracking your path. In experiments, crows on a university campus did this with creepy rubber masks, and yes, these guys are all real. One dangerous mask used during crow captures became so infamous that years later, completely new crows still mobbed it on sight. So now, picture yourself coming back through that same park a week later. You're on your phone, you barely look up, but the power line above you is already reacting. Because that first crow didn't just remember you, it broadcast you. The juvenile has grown a little, but it still recognizes that jawline. The neighbors heard the original complaint call and tagged you as probable threat, sight unseen. You might think every crow you see is meeting you for the first time, but half of them may already have a preloaded opinion. That's the one who kicked at me. Or, if you were kind, that's the walking food dispenser. One tiny, forgettable moment for you, a whole reputation update for them. And here's where it gets slightly unsettling. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how not to become the local villain who gets yelled at every time they take out the trash, and how to nudge your way into being the hero of your neighborhood's crow story instead. So that raises a slightly creepy question. How many of us can a crow actually keep straight in its head? Are you one blurry human in a crowd, or a labeled file in a very organized, very opinionated bird brain. You might think a crow just sorts people into safe and dangerous and calls it a day. But what you actually find when people test this is way more specific. In experiments and long-term field studies, wild crows have been shown to recognize and remember dozens of individual human faces, each tagged with its own emotional label. This one feeds us. That one throws rocks. That one once grabbed my cousin with a net. Scientists don't know the absolute upper limit yet. Is it 50 faces? 100? More? The brain is tiny, but it's packed with neurons at primate levels, so the hardware is there. What seems to matter is relevance. In a quiet rural area with just a few people walking past the same trees every day, a crow doesn't need a giant mental contact list. In a dense city, though, where the sky is basically a moving map of food trucks and potential predators, they upgrade. Let's imagine a busy intersection in your city. To you, it's just traffic and noise. To a crow, it's a rotating cast of recurring characters. The barista who always tosses muffin crumbs at 4 p.m. The groundskeeper with the leaf blower who, accidentally, aims it at them. The kid with the red backpack who never looks up but drops chips constantly. Those faces, those walks, those routines, those get premium storage space. And this is where they weirdly overlap with you. Humans are actually capable of recognizing thousands of faces, but you don't walk around actively remembering every classmate from 3rd grade. Your brain prioritizes the emotionally loud ones: family, friends, your boss, that one neighbor who always parks badly. Crows seem to run a similar system on a smaller scale. High-value allies and repeat threats stay sharp and clear. Background humans fade into generic biped. But their memory isn't just about a static snapshot of your face in good lighting. It's multisensory. They use the shape of your body, the way you move, the rhythm of your walk, even your voice. Change your coat and your hat, and they'll still peg you by your gait. Show up silent, and they might clock you the second you say a word, because your voice file is already saved. And yes, these guys are all real, flying around above you right now, quietly curating their personal human database. So pattern interrupt for your own brain here. Out of all the faces in your city, imagine a crow has decided yours is worth remembering. Not just today, but years from now. Are you the villain in its story, or the one it calls the walking food dispenser? Because next, we're going to see what crows actually do with those memories once you're on the list. So let's imagine how you actually end up on the wrong side of that list. It's early spring. You're 16, bored, walking home in a hoodie you think makes you look older. Up in the cold branches over the sidewalk, a crow nest is wedged in the crook of a maple. You might think, they're just birds, and grab a couple rocks from the gutter. One lazy toss, then another, then a third, a little bigger, because your friend laughs. But what you actually find is that the sky suddenly erupts. The adult crows come off that nest like launched missiles. They scream, they dive, they snap their beaks inches from your hair. It's chaos. You throw your arms over your head and run, pretending you're not scared, but your heart is doing parkour in your chest. To you, it's one wild, stupid moment. A bad decision that dissolves as fast as your adrenaline. To the crows, it's a defining event. In that 10-second explosion, their brains are quietly doing forensic work. They lock in the shape of your face under that too long fringe, the exact angle of your jaw when you look up, the way your shoulders hunch when you throw. They memorize the color of your hoodie, sure, but they go bigger. How tall you are next to the stop sign, how you move when you walk, the rhythm of your voice when you yell back. This is the world of crow memory, where emotional moments get etched deep. Days pass. You stop thinking about it. Exams, group chats, everything else piles on top. By the time summer rolls around, you've basically filed that whole crow incident under weird and moved on. The crows have not moved on. Next spring, you cut across the same street on the way to a different school. New backpack, slightly different hair. You're not even looking up. But above you, one of the adults is on the power line, and it does a tiny double take. That face, that walk, that voice on a phone call. It leans forward and lets out a sharp, angry caw. You flinch as a black shape slices past your ear. Then another. Now you're being dive-bombed again, years later, in front of people who have no idea what you did. And yes, these guys are all real crows, not the same cartoon villain in different feathers. One screams, the others swivel to look, and suddenly the whole block has an opinion about you. Because when a crow flags you as dangerous, it doesn't keep that to itself. It recruits. Juveniles watch the mobbing and learn your face as bad news without ever seeing the original crime. Neighbors 3 streets over start scolding you from rooftops you've never even walked under. One rock-throwing afternoon quietly turns into a traveling reputation that follows you across seasons. So if one bad day can echo this far, what happens if you flip the script? What if, instead of rocks, you offer something a crow's brain will never want to forget? Hold that thought, because the same machinery that powers grudges can also power something much stranger. Crow gratitude. Let's imagine you decide you'd rather be on the crow gratitude list than the crow hit list. No masks, no nets, no drama. Just you, a pocket of snacks, and a small experiment in cross-species public relations. It starts stupidly simple. Same spot, same time. Unsalted peanuts in the shell, dropped on a low wall or patch of grass. You stand a little off to the side, not staring, not waving, just there. Calm, predictable. You might think nothing's happening because the first day, every crow in range pretends you don't exist. But what you actually find is that they're watching you harder than you've ever watched anything in your life. See, crows don't rush new food like seagulls at a beach. They run a whole security protocol. One bird edges closer, head tilted, wings half ready to bolt. The others hang back in the trees and on the wires, reading every tiny move you make. Are you twitchy? Loud? Do you lunge? For a while, it's a stalemate. You trying to look boring, them trying to decide whether you're a snack bar or an ambush. Day 2, day 3, the pattern repeats. Same spot, same time, same peanuts. Well, now the scout gets braver. Maybe it hops in, grabs a shell, and explodes back into the air like it just stole a diamond. It cracks the nut at a safe distance while the whole group watches your face, your eyes, your posture. They're not just learning peanuts happen here. They're building a high-resolution file on you as an individual. Over the next week, the vibe shifts. That one scout becomes 2, then 3. The flock starts to link a very specific routine. This person, this walk, this arm motion of dropping food, with safe, high-value calories. And because this is the world of crow social gossip, that information spreads. Young birds, mates, friends, all plug into the same story. This human is good news. That's when things get weirdly personal. One morning, the crows are already waiting before you arrive. Another day, they spot you halfway down the block and launch into loud calls, shadowing you from tree to tree like a tiny flying fan club. You might think you're just doing your commute, but from their point of view, the walking peanut machine has spawned. And yes, These guys are all real. People who stop feeding for weeks often report the same thing. When they come back, the crows snap right into the old routine, as if the pause never happened. That sticky memory is the same system that powers multi-year grudges. It just got rewired to flag you as a trusted ally. So now you have a choice. Do you stay anonymous, just another blurry primate in the background? Or do you keep showing up, keep that pattern going, and become a named character in the local flock story? Because once you're in their good book, the next question is, how far can this friendship actually go? So, once you're a named character in Crow World, you don't just exist in one bird's head. You get pushed out onto the network. And that network is loud. Let's imagine you're walking down a quiet street, and suddenly the air just rips open. Dozens of crows are circling one spot, dropping in and blasting out this harsh, repeating scream. You might think it's random chaos, just birds yelling because they like drama. But what you actually find, if you listen, is a full-on breaking news alert. One crow spotted something it really did not like. Maybe it's a hawk. Maybe it's a dead raccoon. Maybe it's your face in the dangerous category. That bird starts calling, and those calls are like a flare. Nearby crows launch from rooftops and wires, then crows farther away hear the growing mob and join in. Within minutes, you've got this giant black storm cloud over a single point on the ground, and they are not subtle about it. See, those sounds aren't just generic screaming. Different alarm calls actually carry different information. Aerial predator, ground predator, unfamiliar object, known bad human. It's not human language level detail, but it's way more specific than, danger. When a newcomer arrives, they're not just hearing panic, they're hearing type of threat, level of urgency, and where to look. Now put a human face at the center of that. If you were the one who grabbed a crow last year, or waved a stick at their nest, you've basically become a walking pop-up ad for do not trust this primate. The first birds who know you start mobbing. New birds show up, follow the gaze, and lock on to your face. That's how a single bad interaction gets downloaded into dozens of crow brains in one afternoon. And yes, these guys are all real neighborhood residents. They're not just passing through. They'll see you again tomorrow, and the next week, and they'll remember exactly which mask, which hat, which jawline matched the screaming day. But the mob is only the daytime meeting. In the evening, crows stream into huge roosts, thousands of bodies lining trees and power lines like living Christmas lights. It looks like a calm black cloud settling in, but this is the world of after-hours gossip. Birds that were never at your street corner can still pick up on who got yelled at, who found food, and which direction the hawk came from, just by watching who interacts with whom and how tense everyone is. Pattern interrupt for your brain. This is basically a neighborhood group chat, but with better attendance and no typing. Just raw, shouted data about who to trust, who to avoid, and where the good snacks are. And once your name is in that chat, the next mystery is how far that story can travel beyond your block. So, once that neighborhood group chat is up and screaming, you get to the next unsettling question. How long does your name stay pinned at the top? Days? Weeks? Let's imagine it's years. Back in Seattle, at the University of Washington, researchers didn't just do one weird week of mask cosplay and call it a day. They kept those rubber faces. They kept walking that campus. And they watched what the crows did, not for a semester, but for years. You might think the birds would cool off once the initial drama faded, right? But what you actually find is that the grudge aged like cast iron. Every time someone wore the dangerous mask, The one used during the original captures, crows lit up. Dive bombing, scolding, full aerial outrage. Same sidewalks, same trees, totally different years. The birds' bodies changed. The students changed. The seasons changed. The mask stayed public enemy number one. Here's the really wild part. As the study went on, most of the original captured crows died. Crows don't live forever, and this wasn't some immortal revenge squad. Yet the mobbing didn't fade. New crows, younger birds that had never been trapped by that mask, still came screaming in. Some of them were several breeding cycles removed from the original incident, like the bird equivalent of grandkids showing up to yell at your landlord from 2006. See, that means this wasn't just individual memory hanging on by a thread. This was social memory getting passed down. Adults reacting, youngsters watching, then joining, then teaching the next batch. The mask wasn't just a face, it was a story. Now you might think, okay, maybe they just hate masks, or anything new, or any big human head that looks vaguely cursed. So the researchers tested that. They used different masks, swapped them between nice and dangerous roles, and walked around in control masks that had never been involved in captures. And yes, these guys are all real. The boring mask, the creepy mask, the innocent bystander mask. The crows didn't just freak out at novelty. They targeted the specific, dangerous face. Calm around the neutral masks, chaos for the villain mask. Same coat, same walk, different rubber face, totally different reaction. That's not just vibe detection. That's facial recognition. And it's not just one campus going off the rails. Similar experiments and long-term observations in other cities and countries keep finding the same thing. Crows can remember a dangerous human for at least 5 years. Realistically, probably longer. Long enough that by the time you forget that one afternoon you shoot a crow off your sandwich, its entire family tree may still have you on file. So, if you annoyed a crow in college, it might still clock you when you're changing jobs in a new neighborhood. Which raises a bigger, colder question. If wild animals can track us across years like that, what does that say about the real length of our relationships with them? And what else they might be keeping score on? So if crows are quietly tracking you across years, let's imagine they're not just filing you away as that one tall mammal in a jacket. Imagine they've basically built you a profile. Above your head, in crow vision only, floats a little glowing meter. On one end, cold red, danger. On the other, soft green, ally. And it's not fixed. Every time you step outside, that meter twitches. You toss a peanut on the sidewalk? Tiny nudge toward green. You wave your arms and shout because a crow stole your fries? That needle jumps back into orange so fast it might as well leave skid marks. You might think the crows forget that little outburst once you cool down, but what you actually find is that your face just got tagged in their mental database. See, this isn't some moral scoreboard. Crows aren't up there going, "That human was rude, minus 10 points for vibes." This is a survival calculation. Are you worth approaching for food? Are you suspicious enough to avoid? Are you actively dangerous, the kind of giant primate they should scream at and mob? In the Seattle mask experiment, one dangerous face led to years of angry crow scolding. That mask's meter was permanently locked in deep red. And it's not just your meter in one bird's head. When a crow spots a known threat, it calls loudly, recruits others, and suddenly you've got a whole committee of birds staring down at you, copying that tag. Your floating bar doesn't just change color for one crow, it gets broadcast to the flock. Babies grow up hearing, "That face? We hate that face." They've never seen you do anything, but your score is already baked in. Now here's the weird part. Your meter isn't global. It's local. Well, mostly. The crows near your apartment might have you sitting in calm green because you feed them calmly every morning. But you walk 3 blocks into a different crow neighborhood, and your bar could be sitting at neutral gray, or even cold red, because of some parking lot incident from 5 years ago. Different flocks, different histories, different reputations strapped to the same human skull. And yes, these guys are all real. Real birds, running real-time reputation software on your face while you're just trying to get to the bus stop. Somewhere, a crow still remembers that time you rescued its tangled fledgling and quietly bumped you up a few notches. Somewhere else, another crow still has you flagged for that one time you chucked a snowball. So, what do you actually do with that? By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which tiny behaviors push that invisible meter toward green, which ones slam it into red, and how to quietly hack your own crow reputation without looking like you've joined a very specific bird cult. So here's the twist. While you're busy wondering what your crow thinks of you, the crow is doing something way colder. It's deciding what kind of human you are. Let's imagine you're part of that famous campus experiment. One researcher wears a dangerous mask while trapping crows. Later, that same mask walks across campus in a totally different outfit. New jacket, new pants, maybe even a ridiculous scarf. You might think the birds would key in on the clothing, but what you actually find is that they go straight for the face. Same mask, different outfit. Same furious crow mob. Researchers pushed it harder. They swapped coats, changed hair, added backpacks, walked alone or in groups. As long as the mask stayed the same, the crows still scolded, dove, and called in reinforcements. When a neutral mask showed up in the exact same clothing, silence. No alarm. No mob. The message is pretty clear. The outfit is just background noise. The face is the file name. But crows don't stop there, because the world is too messy to memorize every single person you'll ever see. So they also build shortcuts. A long stick in your hand? That's suspicious. A certain style of wide hat that usually shows up with leaf blowers or chainsaws? Extra caution. Even if your face is brand new, that silhouette might already be filed under keep some distance, just in case. See, this mix is exactly how you survive in a complex world. Hyper-specific memories for the really important characters and broad categories for everyone else. They remember the exact mask that grabbed them years ago, but they also keep a fuzzy category for people who swing things, or people who always bring food. It's like having a few VIP folders, and then a bunch of giant, slightly unfair group chats, and that loops back to you. Out on the sidewalk, you're not just an individual face, you're also part of patterns. Dog walkers who pass calmly at the same time every day. Gardeners who disturb nests with rakes and trimmers. Construction workers who show up with ladders, helmets, and really loud tools. Your unique identity matters, but your role, your props, and your routine all get baked into how crows treat you. Here's the pattern interrupt. We spent so much time talking about human bias, about how we stereotype animals, that we kind of miss the fact that another species is out here stereotyping us. You're not just you to a crow. You're that specific face who feeds us peanuts. And also, one of those noisy ladder people at the same time. So, how do you nudge that label from potential threat with stick to reliable snack distributor in a crow's mental filing cabinet? To answer that, you have to look at what happens when crows start teaching each other about you. So, here's the slightly uncomfortable part. Once the neighborhood crows have filed you under dangerous human with suspicious stick, Are you just doomed? Are you walking around with a permanent wanted poster stapled to your face? You might think the answer is yes. Crows hold grudges. They teach their kids. They yell at your head from 3 houses away. It feels very once a villain, always a villain. But what you actually find, when you zoom out over months and years, is a little more flexible and a lot more strategic. Let's imagine you were part of a study, or you once chased a crow off your roof, and you got tagged as bad news. For a while, every time you step outside, you get the full alarm chorus. Wings overhead, cold stares, that harsh scolding call that sounds like you personally offended their entire bloodline. If nothing changes, that label can stick for a really long time. But then you start changing the script. No more chasing. No more waving sticks. You move slowly. You look up. You toss a few peanuts or food scraps in the same spot, at the same time, every day. And you just keep doing it. Week after week, season after season. Observers who live with crow families like this actually see the volume dial down. The mobbing gets shorter. The flight distance shrinks. 1 or 2 bolder birds start landing closer. It's not instant forgiveness. It's a very cautious rebrand. From an evolutionary point of view, that makes perfect sense. A brain that can recognize faces is already expensive. A brain that can update those files is even better. If a human who used to be dangerous stops causing trouble and starts providing reliable food, it's wasteful to cling to pure hatred. You're leaving snacks on the table. Literally. So the smart move is, keep the memory, but adjust the threat level. That's what you see in long-term field notes. Formerly hated faces slide from attack on sight to watch closely, maybe tolerate. And sometimes, if the food is good and the behavior stays boring and predictable, those same crows will quietly recruit their relatives to the buffet. Well, almost always. Some events are just too big to walk back. If you ripped down a nest, knocked chicks out of a tree, or were involved in trapping adults, that's not just a bad day in crow world. That's a giant, flashing, emotional trauma file. Those birds may never fully relax around you again, and the story they tell their offspring is going to be very loud and very specific. Which raises a wild question. If some reputations can be slowly redeemed, what would an actual apology to your local crows look like? Not metaphorically, but in crow language, with crow rules, on crow time. How do you say, "I'm different now," to a brain that never forgot your face in the first place? Let's imagine you actually do want to say sorry. Not in a poetic, "Dear Crow, my bad" way, but in a way their nervous system will understand. How do you talk to a brain that files your face under danger, shout loudly, every time you step outside? Step 1 is boring, which is exactly why it works. You pick a spot. Same tree, same corner of the yard, same stretch of sidewalk. You pick a time. Maybe early morning, when the air is cold and the neighborhood is still half asleep. And you show up, over and over. No chasing, no reaching, no sudden moves. You just place food down, then step back far enough that they can breathe. You might think the trick is to rush in with giant offerings and dramatic gestures, but what you actually find is that crows are accountants, not romantics. They're running a risk-reward spreadsheet on you. Every calm visit is one tiny line of data. You appeared, you stayed predictable, nothing bad happened, snacks existed. That's how their mental tag for your face starts to slide from danger toward neutral, and, if you really commit, useful. Eye contact is its own whole language here. To a prey animal, a hard, unblinking stare is basically a laser pointer that says, "I hunt you." So you don't lock on like a predator. You use soft, brief glances, check in, then look away. You're telling their very jumpy hindbrain, I see you, I'm aware, but I'm not about to launch. It feels tiny to you, but to a crow deciding whether to land within pecking distance of your shoes, it's huge. Vocal tone gets added to the file too. This is the world of pattern recognition. If every time you show up, you use the same gentle phrase in the same calm voice, that sound becomes part of the safe human package. Think of it like adding a custom ringtone to your contact in their head. In the Seattle mask experiments, crows learned that one creepy rubber face meant danger, and they shouted about it for years. You're trying to build the opposite, a specific combo of face, posture, and sound that means, relax, the peanut vendor is here. And yes, these guys are all real sticklers about consistency. Skip a week, wave your arms, yell at a dog right under their tree, and they'll log that too. But if you keep the variables steady, same spot, same time, same soft eyes, same quiet words, you're basically running your own backyard cognition study. The fun twist is that this isn't just for people trying to get out of crow jail. If you're starting from neutral, the exact same slow, predictable ritual can do more than apologize. It can bootstrap an entirely new cross-species friendship. So what happens when crows don't just forgive you, but start bringing things back? So what happens when crows don't just forgive you, but start acting like you're theirs? Not in the, aw, cute pet way. In the, we will yell at the sky for you way. Let's imagine you're that person on the block who always puts out a little pile of peanuts. Same time, same spot, same quiet voice. Week after week, a small gang of crows starts waiting for you. You might think the deal ends there. You give snacks, they give vibes. But what you actually find is that the relationship doesn't clock out when you go back inside. One afternoon, you're making tea when the sound changes. Not the usual casual cawing, but a sharp, rapid alarm right outside your window. You look out, and the crows you feed are all locked onto the same point in the grass. A neighbor's cat is belly crawling along your fence line, eyes on the spot where your birds usually land. The crows are already on it, calling loudly, hopping closer, making themselves huge, blowing up their feathers as if they're trying to embarrass this predator out of existence. Another day, it's not a cat. A hawk drifts low over the yard, slow and casual, the way only a top predator can afford to be. Instantly, your crows explode upward, screaming, mobbing, chasing it across 3 houses. They're not just defending a nest tree, they're defending the airspace above your porch, above your face. Because here's the weird part. People who feed crows long enough often notice the birds don't just react to any yard. They react to their human's yard. You step outside, and if a strange dog wanders too close, crows sometimes swoop low, scolding like it's May, and you're sitting under their nest. Except it's October, and the nest is 2 streets over. See, in the wild, this kind of dive bombing is classic nest defense. Get too close to crow babies, and you get strafed. But around familiar humans, that behavior can seem repurposed. There are stories of crows harassing people who approach the home of someone the birds like, while totally ignoring the same people on a different street. Same person, same clothes, different context. So what's going on? We can't climb into a crow's head and check the protect box, but the pattern is hard to ignore. Certain faces get tagged as important, valuable, worth yelling for. The bird isn't just guarding a patch of grass. It's reacting to a specific individual it has filed away in that cold, efficient little brain. And here's your pattern interrupt. In that mental map, what are you? A food machine on legs, or something stranger? When a crow screams at a hawk over your roof, have you become honorary flock, a temporary featherless crow stitched into their social territory? Well, this is the world of crow intelligence, where the line between neighbor and family gets blurry fast. So if some crows are willing to guard you like that, what do they do when they want to say thank you? Sometimes the thank you isn't a shiny bead on your windowsill. Sometimes it's a lesson quietly passed down in a crow family workshop. Let's imagine you're not in your neighborhood now, but on a humid Pacific island, New Caledonia. In the trees above you, a black shape hops along a branch, grabs a twig, and does something your brain files under, "Wait, that's not normal bird behavior." The crow pins the twig with its foot and starts bending it. Not randomly. It curves the end into a tiny hook, trims off side branches, tests the angle like a picky mechanic. Then it shoves this homemade fishing rod into a dead log, twists, and pulls out a fat white grub. Tool, hook, reward. That's planning, and it only works if you understand that invisible chain of cause and effect. You might think this is a one-off genius bird, the crow equivalent of that kid who builds a giant robot for a school project. But what you actually find is a whole culture. Young New Caledonian crows don't just magically know how to do this. They watch, for weeks, for months, perched nearby while a parent works the same log over and over. See, the juvenile doesn't start by inventing anything. It starts by staring. It tracks every move, where the adult grips the twig, how sharply the hook is bent, how deep it goes into the hole, how long it waits before yanking. Then it tries, fails, drops the twig, screams a little, tries again. It's basically an apprentice standing over a craftsperson's shoulder, copying the moves until the pattern locks in. That kind of observational learning is not just monkey see, monkey do, with feathers. To pull it off, your brain has to tag individuals. This is mom. This is dad. This is the weird uncle who's actually good at tools. You have to remember who succeeded, who failed, and which technique was worth copying. It's the same cognitive toolkit you need to watch specific humans and file them under safe, dangerous, or walking snack dispenser. And yes, these guys are all real. In lab experiments, New Caledonian crows have gone off script too. Give them a new puzzle box and a pile of materials, and they don't just recreate the standard hook. Sometimes they build totally new shapes, twist multiple pieces together, or reshape a flat strip into something that works even better. That's not simple instinct. That's flexible problem-solving inside a skull that stays cold and tiny, but somehow runs a giant mental workshop. So, if a crow can learn the exact curve of a hook by silently watching its parents, what else is it quietly learning by watching you? When you walk under those power lines, are you just a blurry human shape? Or are you already a labeled entry in a very detailed crow database that's still being updated every time you step outside? Let's imagine you're walking down your street, half on your phone, half on autopilot, and you suddenly get that prickly feeling that you're being watched. You look up. One young crow is staring straight at you from a roofline, head tilted, eyes bright, like it's trying to download your entire life story in one glance. You might think it's just curious, some random bird with nothing better to do. But what you actually find, if you follow that bird for a day, is a full-time apprenticeship happening above your head. That juvenile is shadowing its parents from chimney to antenna to power line, not just memorizing where the good trash cans live, but carefully tracking who walks under them and how the adults react to each face. See, when an adult crow stiffens as you appear, when it gives that sharp, angry scold call, the youngster is right there, watching every feather twitch. It sees which direction the beak points, which human gets followed, which one gets ignored. Every time a parent dives a little closer to a particular person, that's another note in the mental notebook. This one is trouble. That one is fine. That jogger with the loud music is weird, but probably harmless. In the Seattle mask experiments, crows did exactly this. One dangerous, masked human captured birds once, years ago. After that, whenever that same mask showed up, adults exploded into alarm calls, and juveniles joined in. They weren't just copying noise, they were learning a rule. This face equals danger. And yes, these guys are all real, not just some urban legend about vengeful goth pigeons. So, when you shoo away an adult crow, or toss it a peanut, you're not just dealing with one bird. You're performing in front of its kid. The juvenile might never come close to you, might never risk landing on your railing, but it's still watching from a safer perch, silently updating its internal map. That human feeds us. That human chases us. That human once threw something. Do not forget. Over time, this turns into a rolling, multi-year apprenticeship. Each new generation doesn't start from zero. They hatch into a neighborhood where their parents already have strong opinions about specific humans, and those opinions get handed down along with flight routes and tool tricks. This is the world of crow culture, reputations that outlive any single awkward interaction you barely remember. Which means, by the time you finally notice that young crow staring at you, its parents may already have told it a whole story about who you are. The question is, what role are you playing in that story? Villain, ally, or just background noise in a very detailed family saga that's still being written every time you step outside? So if you're already a character in the Crow family saga, the next question is brutal and kind of amazing at the same time. Are they just remembering you, or actually talking about you? Here's the frustrating part. We cannot translate crow yet. No subtitles, no handy phrasebook, no Google Squawk. But what you actually find, when you watch them long enough and wire up a few microphones, is that their calls don't show up randomly. They spike and fade in really specific patterns around human activity, like someone flipping channels between different commentaries on the same show. The show is you. You might think a caw is just a caw, background noise over the parking lot. But stand near a researcher wearing one of those infamous danger masks from the Seattle experiments, and the entire soundscape changes. Alarm calls slam into the air, sharp and repetitive, way louder and way more frequent than normal. One crow starts, then another joins. Then a whole cluster is suddenly yelling at the exact same human face, even if that person is pretending to mind their own business. Now change the character. Same sidewalk. Different human. This one shows up with peanuts every morning. The sound is softer, lower, more conversational. You hear contact calls, little back and forth notes that seem to say, "I'm here, you're here, food is here, nobody panic." The flock doesn't mob this person. They orbit them. They land closer. They watch more, shout less. If alarm calls are the neighborhood group chat screaming in all caps, these are the quiet texts that go, "He's cool, come over." And it gets even more specific. In some corvids, researchers have found distinct calls for different threats. One sound for a hawk overhead, another for a person on foot, another for a perched predator that isn't moving yet. That's not just noise, that's a vocabulary of danger levels and directions. This is the world of fine-grained information sharing, where something scary is broken down into what, where, and how fast do we need to react. So, functionally, yes, crows are talking about us Every time they use those calls to recruit others to mob a particular face, or to signal that a specific human has arrived with snacks. They might not have a word for Greg, the guy with the bike helmet, but their behavior says, "That one. Remember that one." And yes, these guys are all real. Pattern interrupt for your brain. Let's imagine you're walking down your usual street. It's quiet, maybe a little cold. You scroll your phone. You pass under a power line. You don't look up. But above you, in a language you can't hear, a second conversation might be unfolding. One crow spotting you, another asking, "Is that the dangerous one?" A third basically saying, "Relax, that's the peanut human." See, once you realize that, you start to wonder what else they're saying, especially when no humans are around at all. So now you've got this weird realization hanging over you. The birds might be talking about you. Let's imagine you walk the same route every morning. You might think you're just another anonymous human in a cold, concrete maze, but what you actually find is that the maze is already occupied. Above the bus stop, on the grocery sign, in that scraggly tree by the parking lot, small black mines are running the numbers on you every time you pass. And that raises a pretty uncomfortable question. If they can recognize you, remember what you did, and change their behavior because of it, what do you owe them? Not in some giant, abstract way. In the really boring, everyday moments where you either toss a pebble at a bird or you don't. See, casual cruelty feels tiny from the human side. You throw something at a crow for fun. You knock down a nest because it's just birds. You let a kid chase them until they scatter. 5 minutes later, you've forgotten. But the crow that got chased didn't just forget. It logged your face, called the neighbors, and basically filed a complaint with the entire block. In those Seattle mask experiments, one dangerous face turned into a multi-year vendetta. Crows that had never been captured still freaked out at the mask because other crows had told them, loudly, that this was bad news. That's not just one scared animal. That's a whole community updating its shared map of which humans are safe and which ones are trouble. So every lazy act of harassment doesn't just make one bird flinch. It can make the whole neighborhood louder, jumpier, more stressed. The city feels a little colder, a little more hostile, not just for them, but for you too, because now you're walking under a sky that's decided you're the villain in the story. But flip it. Quiet kindness works the same way, just slower and a lot less dramatic. You stand still instead of swinging. You give them space. Maybe you drop a few peanuts in the same place, at the same time, for weeks. One crow gets curious, then another, then a youngster who watches how the adults act around you. Over time, that mental file on your face shifts from unknown to probably fine to, oh, it's the snack human. And yes, these guys are all real moral witnesses to your habits. Once you see that, cities stop looking like human habitats with random wildlife sprinkled in. This is the world of shared neighborhoods, where other thinking beings are running long, detailed experiments on us, even as we pretend we're the only ones doing science. Well, if the crows are already keeping score, you have to ask, are we really the only moral agents on the block? Or are we about to find out we've been the ones under observation this whole time? So if we're the ones under observation, what does that actually say about us? You might think the answer is still pretty simple. Humans at the top, everyone else. Background extras. We write the laws, we build the cities, we launch the satellites. Crows just yell at us from the power lines, right? Well, let's imagine you try to defend that hierarchy to a crow. You could point out the obvious. Humans really do pull off stunts no crow is getting anywhere near. complex language that can describe black holes and tax codes, giant networks of strangers coordinating across the whole planet, written laws, courts, international agreements, the whole slow, messy machine of global cooperation. No crow is drafting a climate treaty or accidentally emailing the wrong spreadsheet to 12,000 people. So, open and shut case? Not quite, because every time we draw a bright line between human minds and animal minds, some bird casually steps over it. Tool use was supposed to be our thing, until a crow bends a bit of wire into a hook on the first try. Planning ahead was supposed to be uniquely human, until a scrub jay caches food in places where it knows it won't be bullied later. Even episodic-like memory, remembering specific events, starts looking less special when a crow recalls exactly which person in which mask grabbed it years ago and still reacts like the scene just happened. And that face thing? That's where it gets uncomfortably close. In the Seattle mask experiment, the dangerous face didn't just live rent-free in one crow's head. It spread. Crows who had never been captured saw that mask, heard the alarm calls, and instantly treated it like a walking crime scene. They learned who to hate by watching each other. You walk across campus in that mask, and suddenly you're moving through a cold, invisible reputation field that you didn't consent to and can't see, but they can. See, that's not just a simple reflex. That's social learning, long-term memory, individual recognition, and emotional coloring all stacked together in a brain the size of a walnut. It doesn't make crows tiny people with wings, but what you actually find is that the gap between their kind of mind and ours is way narrower than the old story allowed. So maybe it's not a cliff, where human intelligence stands on a giant isolated ledge and everything else just falls off below. Maybe it's a branching tree, a spectrum, with humans on one twig and crows perched surprisingly close on another, watching us, updating their files, teaching their kids who we are. Accepting that doesn't shrink us. It does something stranger. It expands the circle of minds we're sharing this neighborhood with. And once you realize the watchers have opinions, you have to ask a colder question. How do you actually want to behave, knowing those black silhouettes overhead are taking notes? Because the next time you look up, the experiment might already be running. And you're the variable. So, let's imagine you hit pause on your life for a second. Not in some giant cosmic way, just in the boring places. The bus stop, the corner where you always wait for the light, that weird stretch of sidewalk by the grocery store that always smells a little like old fruit and cold exhaust. You might think these are anonymous zones, that you just pass through them like a ghost and they forget you instantly. But what you actually find, if you tilt the camera up, is a repeat audience. The same crow on the streetlight. The same pair on the telephone wire by your bus route. A loose little cast of black silhouettes that has been quietly watching your daily commute like a long-running show. Start mentally mapping it. Morning. That tree by the parking lot where 3 crows usually sit. Lunch. The plaza where pigeons swarm the dropped fries and a single crow hangs back, judging everyone. Evening. Your dog walk loop, where a crow sometimes glides ahead of you, landing on the next pole like it's escorting you home. Those aren't random extras. Those are regulars. And the wild part is, they may already have opinions about you. Not vague, species-level, human sacrum danger stuff, but individual takes. Neutral, wary, curious, or weirdly welcoming. Did you once shoo them away with a jacket? Did you stop to watch quietly instead? Did you bring snacks? Every tiny move you made went into a little mental ledger. See, crows run this social accounting software in their heads where faces get tagged and filed. You are not a human. You're that one specific human who always walks fast and never looks up, or the one who talks on the phone and occasionally drops chips, or the one who stared too long that one time and felt off. And it's not just crows. The magpie that flashes past your window, the jay that screams from the oak, the raven that patrols the edge of the parking garage like it owns the top floor. They're all running their own version of that ledger. Different species, same basic idea. Track the neighbors, especially the tall, clumsy apes that control the doors, the food, and the sudden loud noises. These aren't pets. They're not livestock. They're wild minds, each carrying a private map of the humans in their territory, adjusting around us in real time. Shift a little farther away when you show up. Drop lower when you seem calm. Call the family if you don't. Pattern interrupt. Next time you're walking down a street late, feeling like the last person awake in the city, stop. Don't look at the empty windows. Look at the roof lines, the wires, the dark branches. You might not be as unobserved as you think, because once you realize the city is stitched together by these silent relationships, you start to wonder if they already know you. What story have you been telling them this whole time? So let's imagine you rewind that feeling of being watched and zoom straight up above the rooftops into the crow version of a group chat. Because with crows, you're never just dealing with one bird. You're dealing with a network. You might think the story starts when you first toss them a peanut. But what you actually find when you look at the science is that one weird human decision can echo for years. On the University of Washington campus, researchers put on those now famous rubber masks and briefly trapped a few crows. One short, very annoying afternoon for the birds. That's it. No torture chamber. Just capture, band, release. And yet, for years afterward, anyone walking through campus in that same dangerous mask got mobbed, dive-bombed, scolded, followed. Not just by the original victims, but by crows that had never been caught, never been touched, never met that specific human in their lives. They weren't remembering an event. They were remembering a face that had become a story. See, when a crow spots a known threat, it doesn't just quietly avoid them. It yells. It recruits. Nearby birds fly over, watch the scene, and basically download the file. That face equals bad news. Young birds grow up hearing those alarms, watching their parents and neighbors rage at the same mask, until the reaction is baked into the whole local flock. One short experiment, a multi-year campus-wide vendetta. Now flip it. Same brain, same network, completely different vibe. Let's imagine you're the person who always steps out into the courtyard at 8 a.m. with a handful of unsalted peanuts. At first, it's one crow, maybe two, landing on the railing, doing that cautious sidestep like, "Are you going to throw that or?" But keep it up for a week, and suddenly the wires are busier. A month, and your building has a small morning rush hour of black wings. Your neighbors didn't sign up for this, but they're in it anyway. They hear the calls. They see birds lining the gutter. They start noticing beaks pointed at your window before you even open it. Other crows flying by notice the crowd and swing in to investigate. Because if a bunch of birds are staring at one human, that human is probably important. You've turned an ordinary balcony into a tiny hotspot of crow culture. And yes, these guys are all real social engineers. Positive and negative both spread. A kid who throws rocks, a dog that lunges, a person who always walks calmly and looks up with a soft voice. All of that gets recorded, replayed, and shared. This is the world of neighborhood-scale reputation, where your choices don't just affect one bird. They slowly rewrite how an entire patch of sky reacts to people. So if one mask can shift a campus and one balcony can shift a block, what happens if a whole city decides, on purpose, to be on good terms with its crows? How different would the morning sound? How different would the dark branches feel if the birds up there were actually rooting for you? So, let's imagine a city that actually takes that idea seriously. Not a Disney musical, just your city. Same cracked sidewalks, same traffic hum. But up above, on the cables and antennas, the crows have quietly decided you're one of the good ones. You're on a small balcony, early, when the air is still a little cold and the street is barely awake. Coffee in your hand, not doing anything dramatic. Across the alley, on a leaning TV antenna, 3 crows land with that soft woof of wings. They look at you, not in a horror movie way, just a steady evaluating stare, like a neighbor who actually remembers your name. You might think that's nothing, just birds being birds. But what you actually find, if you keep showing up, is that this tiny, boring moment starts to stretch across years. You sip coffee most mornings. Some days you toss a few peanuts onto the garage roof. Some days you don't. You never chase them, never reach, never test how close you can get, because this is not a taming montage. This is the world of low drama, high memory coexistence. At first they land and hop back, all nerves and side-eye. A year in, they're waiting before you open the door, bodies looser, calling in those low conversational rattles instead of full-volume alarm. They bring their mate. Then a scruffy youngster who stares too long at your mug like it might be edible. You don't own them. They don't perform. They just include you in the morning routine. Every so often, something weird happens. One day, there's a green glass bead on the railing. Another day, a bent pull tab, placed right where you usually set your cup. It's not payment in any human sense. It's more like the relationship has gotten big enough and calm enough that they start experimenting back. And yes, these guys are all real. Wild crows have been caught on camera doing exactly this for people who are predictably kind. Nothing explodes. No crow perches on your arm. You don't become the giant bird wizard of the block. The magic is that it stays small and steady and astonishingly reliable. They learn your schedule. You learn their family drama by sound alone. Someone new steps on the balcony and the antenna goes tense. You step out and the shoulders of the sky literally drop. And here's the part you can actually try. This calm pact doesn't need special gear or a backyard forest or a doctorate in bird psychology. It needs time, attention, and a willingness to let wild animals treat you as an individual instead of background noise. You stand where they can see you. You behave the same way, over and over. You let them decide how close is close enough. So imagine walking through your own city, years from now, knowing that somewhere above the traffic lights and bus stops are birds who know your face and are quietly glad you're still around. How would it feel to realize the skyline is not just scenery, but a network of tiny black-feathered witnesses who filed you under safe? And if that's possible with one balcony and a few peanuts, what happens when we scale that up, on purpose, across an entire species' memory? So, if we're going to scale this up on purpose, you need a promotion, from random background human to known face in crow society, not crow overlord, not bird trainer, just the neighbor they actually recognize and quietly approve of when you walk past the bus stop. Let's imagine you want to start tomorrow. You might think the move is to march outside with a giant bag of snacks and become the bird buffet. But what you actually find, if you try that, is a lot of nervous wing flapping, some suspicious staring, and a real risk of creating dependence you can't keep up with. Crows are smart, not props. so you start small. A few unsalted peanuts in the shell, maybe some bits of plain kibble, once a day, or even a few times a week, and that's it. See, the goal isn't to become a vending machine, it's to become a pattern. Choose one spot, a railing, a patch of grass, the same corner of your roof. Then pick a rough time window when you actually show up. Crows notice schedules. They're already timing garbage trucks and school bells. You're just adding a new, very predictable blip to their map. When you get there, move like you're walking into a quiet library, not onto a sports field. No chasing, no clapping, no whistling like you're calling a dog. Just walk, place the food, maybe step back a few paces, and let them decide how close is safe. It might be days before anyone lands while you're still in view. That's fine. For a bird that remembers masks for years, a week of cautious observation is basically speed dating. Now you can make it easier on their brains. Simple, repeatable cues. Maybe you always wear the same bright hat or the same long coat. Maybe you use one gentle phrase in the same tone every time you arrive. You're not casting a spell. You're just giving their visual and sound processing something consistent to latch onto, like a logo they can recognize from way up on the power line. And here's the pattern interrupt. Don't think of this as training crows at all. Think of it as introducing yourself to a new community that already talks about humans behind our backs. They'll watch how you move, what you do when you're annoyed, whether you stomp at them or shrug and walk around. They'll decide if you're filed under safe, sketchy, or absolutely yell at this one. Respect is the only real rule. Never try to touch them. Never corner them for a selfie. And don't wander near nests during breeding season like you're on a scavenger hunt. Be mindful of neighbors who don't want a huge, screaming fan club outside their window. You're aiming for a small, steady relationship, not a feathery flash mob. If you do this right, one day you'll step outside empty-handed, in a rush, and still hear that familiar caw from the streetlight. That's when you realize the food was just the introduction. The memory of you is what stayed. So what can that memory actually hold about you, inside a crow's brain that rivals a primate's? Inside that walnut-sized skull, they're actually running a surprisingly sharp little database. Let's imagine you're just another blur on the sidewalk. To you, the crow is background noise. But up on that power line, a pair of dark eyes is doing something very different, scanning your face, mapping its shape, filing you away. You might think they just remember human as one big, vague category, but what you actually find is way more personal. Crows can pick out individual faces, even when you swap jackets, hats, or bags. The angle of your jaw, the way your hair frames your cheeks, the distance between your eyes. Those details become a kind of living wanted poster or VIP pass in a crow's mind. See, the Seattle mask experiment was basically the moment humans accidentally confirmed this. Researchers put on creepy rubber masks, captured a few crows, and then walked around campus like nothing happened. Years later, students who had nothing to do with the study could put on that same mask and instantly get mobbed. Dive bombing, scolding, a full aerial roast session because one dangerous face had become crow folklore. And yes, these guys are all real. Other crows watched the drama, joined in, and then taught their young that this specific face was bad news. That's not just memory, that's culture. One bad afternoon in a net turned into a multi-year, multi-generation grudge. But it isn't all revenge stories. When people quietly feed crows, stay calm, and don't act like a chaos gremlin. The birds notice that too. You get the other side of the ledger. Quiet approaches, softer calls, Maybe even those famous gifts left on railings and windowsills. Bits of metal, shiny plastic, a button that definitely did not evolve in a forest. It's like the crow version of a thank you card, just with more bottle caps. Inside that dense, powerful forebrain, packed with primate-level numbers of neurons, your face gets tied to an emotion: relief, curiosity, anger, safety. They don't just remember what you did. They remember how you made them feel, and they pass that story on every time a youngster peers over the edge of the nest while you walk by. Meanwhile, you forget. That guy you passed yesterday? Already gone from your mind. The crow on the lamppost, just another black dot in the sky. But up there, the mental file on you might still be open, updated, and actively shared in small, scratchy voices. So when you step outside tomorrow, you'll remember this video for a while, then let it fade. Some of the birds watching you won't. They'll remember your face long after the thumbnail is gone, quietly deciding, every time they see you, which story they're going to keep telling about you. So, let's imagine that tomorrow is not just going outside. It's walking into a neighborhood where your reputation already exists. The crows have a file on you. The question is, do you ever actually open it from your side? On your next walk, try one simple upgrade. Look up, not metaphorically, literally. Scan the power lines, the roof edges, that one scraggly tree by the bus stop. Who's watching you? Who calls when you pass? Who just keeps preening like your background noise? You might think it's all just generic bird static, but what you actually find, if you pay attention for 5 minutes, is a pattern with your name on it. You'll notice the loud one, doing the full alarm routine the second you appear. You'll notice the quiet one, tilting its head, tracking your face like it's running a tiny facial recognition app in cold black eyes. You may even notice that when one bird calls, others join in from way farther away than you thought were your crows. That's your daily commute, starring you, as understood by other minds. If you want to push this from creepy to interesting, run a tiny experiment. Pick one spot you pass a lot: a corner, a parking lot light, a bench in the park. Once a day for a week, stop there. Same time if you can. Stand calmly for a minute or two. Maybe offer a few unsalted peanuts, always in the same place, and then step back. Don't chase. Don't stare like a giant predator. Just exist. See, you're basically telling the local crows, this is the version of me I want you to remember. Day 1, they'll probably keep their distance and yell about the huge, suspicious primate leaving mystery objects. Day 3, someone will swoop closer, land, and lean in, trying to decide if this is a trap. By day 7, if you've been boring and predictable enough, you might get a crow dropping down almost at your feet, grabbing a peanut, then bouncing back up to a branch to judge you in peace. That's not just feeding wildlife. That's your face slowly moving from the danger column toward useful idiot. And while you're doing that, think backward. Is there a stretch of your walk where crows always seem extra agitated when you pass? Do they dive a little closer, or shout longer, or recruit more voices? Is there another place where they're weirdly calm around you, even when you make noise? You might be walking through old stories you helped write without realizing it. The time you walked a barking dog there, the time you carried something shiny, the time you stopped and stared too long at a nest. This is the world of moving through your city as if it's full of active, watching minds, not just background decoration. Once you start, it's very hard to go back to just birds. Because if crows are tracking you like this, what are the jays doing? The gulls? The parrots in city parks that have learned to swear at specific people? If you stick around, or subscribe. We're going to keep pulling on that thread. We'll meet the other bird geniuses sharing your streets and ask what it really means to live among neighbors who remember your face, your choices, and your stories long after you forget theirs. So, let's imagine you actually do stick around. You close this video, your room goes quiet, the screen goes dark, and you step outside. The air feels a little colder than it did before, not because the temperature changed, but because now you're thinking about who's looking back. You might think it's just you, the sidewalk, some cars, maybe a dog. But what you actually find is that familiar sensation right between your shoulder blades, that tiny itch of being watched from above. You look up. Power lines, a chimney, a tangle of winter branches, and on one of them, a single crow. It tilts its head, just a few degrees, not dramatic, like it's scrolling through a mental photo gallery only it can see. This face with the headphones, this face with the trash bag, this face that once offered a peanut, or waved its arms, or shouted for it to get off the roof. Curious? Cautious? Quietly pleased? You don't get subtitles for this part. See? That bird isn't just seeing human. It's running pattern recognition on you in real time. Angle of jaw, shape of hair, how you move your shoulders. The same way the Seattle crows learned those creepy rubber masks and then taught the entire neighborhood to hate them. This one is deciding which folder to drag you into. Gift giver, troublemaker, background noise. And yes, these guys are all real. People have stories of crows dropping bottle caps on their doorstep, lining up bits of metal, leaving what looks suspiciously like trade offers. Other people have stories of being dive-bombed for years because they once messed with a nest. If that's you, this is your moment. Put it in the comments. Gifts, grudges, weird little crow jump scares. Let's build the human side archive to match the one already running in their heads. Because right now, somewhere, a crow is probably telling its family about you. So, if you want to keep exploring what those wild minds are doing with that information, this is the world of the channel you just watched. Hit subscribe, stick around, and we'll go meet the parrots that swear at specific people, the jays that stash food based on who's watching, the other black-winged neighbors running giant social experiments right over your street. You might think you're just binging animal videos. But what you actually find is a bigger question. What does it mean to live in a city where the wildlife keeps receipts on you? When this screen forgets you, it will be instant. The algorithm doesn't care if you were kind today or cruel last week, but some of the wild black eyes above your street will not. They'll keep your image filed away, sharp and cold and specific. The next move in that relationship is yours. And if you do something worth remembering, you may want to come back and tell us what they did next.